Hello, hello, my customer success friends. 𝐇𝐈𝐆𝐇𝐋𝐈𝐆𝐇𝐋𝐈𝐆𝐇𝐓𝒄𝐄e for CSM Practice, the Customer Success Podcast, where you have all the tips and tactical advice captured right here from the best of the best CS executives, leaders, and customer success professionals that are in the trenches to come in and tell you what have they done lately, what initiatives worked for them, how did they do it, and why should you be doing that as well. Today I have such a great guest, Chris Dishman from Totango and Catalyst. Who doesn't know Totango? Who doesn't know Catalyst? Both great companies merged. And so I am super, super excited to talk about what have they been doing lately since the merge in their customer success operations, what rocks their world. So they're not going to pitch you. Obviously, you're welcome to check them out. But so for those who don't know who Totango and Catalyst is, or how your new world looks like, what kind of customers does your company work with, or does your team specifically work with? How large is your team, if you don't mind sharing?
I started with Totango about a year and a half ago. We merged with Catalyst earlier this year. And we did that with a sense of we're solving a couple of different problems in a very similar way. And this got an opportunity for us to say, hey, look, we can be better together as we look at how we solve these problems. And so that was kind of how we came to grips with coming together as a single team. And when we think about the problems that we're solving, as we think of the world of customer success, I think we all agree it's evolving. There is an evolution of CS that's happening that we've seen coming over the last year or so, and it's leaning in more towards revenue, more towards an ownership of revenue, responsibility for revenue, and how we as customer success can really help propel and drive that sustainable growth within our companies, which is something that we all desperately need right now. We know that acquisitions of the last year have slowed quite a bit, and so we need to lean into the knowledge, the experience that our CS teams have in order to help drive that growth. And so that's what we're doing at Totango and Catalyst. We're working to unify our platforms together so it'll be something that is substantially better than they are individually, hence the better together narrative. And we're excited about it. It's been a rapid couple of months since we've merged and incredibly exciting. And the response that we're getting from our customers from the market is fantastic. So people get the direction we're going, which is pretty exciting.
Before the merge or in the past, you had the AE team that was helping with renewals, and you had CSMs. How many CSMs do you currently have on your team, and what is the CSM to customer ratio?
Within the team right now, we have just over a dozen CSMs that are managing our book of business. The ratio on how we deal with that varies by segment. Like many customers, we have kind of a digital segment, which is more of that scaled success motion. Then we call it our core group. So that's that middle tranche of customers. We typically look at that by either customer size, ARR, and or combination of that along with company size and what we see potential from that customer as it relates to growth. Those CSMs are managing roughly 40 to 50 to 1 type ratio on customers to CSMs. And then when we get into more of our strategic enterprise, it's typically less than 20 customers per CSM. That ranges again. We do have some enterprise customers. We've got some that are more in that strategic realm, so they have even fewer customers than that. But we kind of do a mishmash depending on ARR and company size and amount of effort that it takes to deal with some of those strategic accounts.
You recently made some changes in the renewal process. So before we dig into what changes you've made, kind of wanted to say what propelled you wanting to make that change?
When I started with Totango, which was back in November of 22, we were making some changes just in how we approach the market as a whole, the go-to-market change. And for those of you who know Totango, Totango has been around for a very long time. And as we see companies grow and expand and shift to accommodate a given market and segment, we found ourselves at that when I joined back at the end of 22. And so we were pushing more on a sales-led growth and pushing up market. We have a lot of large customers on the Totango side, and we felt like that was the right approach, which truthfully, as we look at the outcome of 2023 and the economy and things that we're faced with there, it was a great move on our behalf. As we got into 2023, we had our account executives primarily running renewals, and the CSM team was there to kind of support them in that. And the thing that was interesting is we've been seeing that new business growth was a little bit difficult, a little bit of a slug to get some of those new deals in. And so we didn't want to take the account executives' time in processing, let's just call it standard renewals. And I want to be clear too, there's renewals and then there are expansion renewals that are highly strategic. When I say that we're moving the commercial responsibility to the customer success manager, I don't think that in any sense you can say, okay, we're going to do this and it's just all or nothing. We all know that there are scenarios that you have to kind of deal with. Truthfully, if you look at different companies and different sizes of organizations and what is involved in your CS team and what they're doing, you can't just say, oh, well, Chris is moving all of his renewals to the customer success manager, and so therefore we should too. It very much depends on your organization and your structure and your goals and your focus. There are a number of factors that go into that. But as we looked at it through last year, and especially with the merger with Catalyst, we found this as an opportunity to make some shifts and take some of the onus of those renewals and put it into the customer success manager's hands. That frees up some time on the account executives. And as I said, there are scenarios where we want to have the account executive involved and they're strategically involved in, let's call it like a pod of a team that's working to help grow a given account. So that totally still holds and makes sense. But just for your standard kind of renewal process and driving expansion and upsells, let's let the customer success managers do it. So that was the reason for the change. And as we thought about it, why we wanted to make the change was a couple of key reasons. One, we wanted to free up time with the account executive. We wanted to make sure that they were able to focus on the very tough job that they had in bringing in new business in this current economy. So that was one reason. The second one is just streamlining the process for our customers. If you've got an account executive and the account executive can jump on and do those renewals quick, that's great, that's easy, but often that's not always the case. And so if it's a pretty standard renewal, why not just reduce a number of touch points and contacts, reduce the friction with the customer, say take their order, but let's just talk to them about what they need. We'll make adjustments accordingly, let the team process it and move forward. That was kind of what drove it, was reducing friction with our customers, streamlining the process, creating some efficiencies, and giving some additional bandwidth to the account executives to continue to work to grow the acquisition side of the business.
With these goals in mind, looking back to now a few months after you started making the change, what are some of the initial positive impact you're seeing on the team, on customers' feedback or engagement during the process?
It's been interesting. And I will say that making a change like this is not always easy. And certainly there have been bumps in the road that we've dealt with. I was talking yesterday with my CS Ops and one of my directors, and we were just kind of looking back on this topic. And it was interesting because we feel like we've done a good job of streamlining some of these renewals. We've got most of our Q2 renewals in, with the exception of a couple. Everything's coming in on time or ahead of time. We're doing a great job of staying in front of and just working those renewals through the process. For Q1, from an expansion standpoint, we hit 115% of our target across Catalyst Totango in Q1 on our expansion number. And that was largely in part due to not just the CSMs, but the CSMs and the focus they put, along with the work that we're doing with our account executive team. The partnership that we have there is working. So the initial findings are, one, we're seizing the opportunities to grow accounts. That's good. We're getting renewals in on time and or early, which is also good. And these are getting done quickly with less friction with our customers. So across the board, we're seeing a very positive outcome as it relates to the kind of the initial fruits of the initiative.
We did the prep for this call. You mentioned a couple of things are kind of like I would say ingredients to get this recipe right. I heard you. It's not a perfect recipe yet, but you can already, looking back, oh, I'm so glad we did that. Like there are some things that were definitely key ingredients in this recipe. I think one of the things that you mentioned was comp plans, and another one was getting things right and like defining the RACI with the other team members, such as the AEs, and getting sales to collaborate and understand when do we just collaborate and when do we drive, which you started talking about that. Comp plan, defining the new process and the roles and responsibility. And then you mentioned something related to CSQO.
Yes.
Do you mind if we just kind of like poke on each one of these three elements, and you can kind of expand why were they such critical elements in making this happen and getting these results that you just talked about?
Let's start with the RACI, and then we'll go CSQO, and then we'll talk about comp. The interesting thing as we started looking at this, there has to be a partnership with the sales leadership obviously. I would think that would go without saying, but let's just go ahead and call it out. And this is also an executive level kind of agreement approach that you need to have. You've got to have buy-in across your executive team, and specifically with your CRO and with your VPs of CS. And one of the things that we did at the beginning of this is we got in a room physically and started talking through what are some of the concerns from the CS leadership? What are some of the concerns from the sales leadership? What do we think that where can we do the handoff? Where do we need to do the handoff as it relates to if we're getting into a motion that involves the account executive, or what does that look like? So the interesting thing as we started kind of going through that process, at first it seemed like it was going to be super easy, but then one of my CS leaders might say something to the sales rep and say, oh, we'll handle this. And I said, well, wait a minute, we would want to do that because of these reasons. And so you can't spend enough time kind of prepping through that stuff. I mean, it's something you have to have good, clear communication and be a little bit vulnerable with each other and say, hey, listen, we want to get to the best outcome. And so that means that we need to have a real conversation about what are concerns and what we can do to work through that. So that was the initial process that we took. As I mentioned before, nothing is perfect. And as we've gotten into actual practical application of the RACI, we've started finding holes in our initial plan. Those are things that we go back and we iterate on. We adjust and say, okay, for this set of customers, we need to handle these a little bit differently, or in these scenarios, we need to handle these a little bit differently. So building out and understanding who is involved, when they're involved, what they're responsible for, who is driving it versus who's just informed is definitely something that's important that is communicated. And then I would say that to kind of put a cap on that one is the other piece of this, and this is funny because I'm generally pretty good about communicating. We didn't do a great job communicating. We thought we did, but as I start looking back on some of the errors that we made, it was a lack of communication, quite frankly, to our account executive and our sales counterparts on what the expectations were. I felt like we did a good job doing that for the CS team. I thought we did a good job on the sales team, but we didn't. And that's on me. So as we started going through that process, we have to start learning and understanding, okay, the communication is something that we need to do collaboratively across both organizations so that there's complete clear alignment on who's involved, who's driving, who's responsible for the various scenarios. And then you got to be flexible. You have to understand that as you get into real life, as you start applying this in the wild, so to speak, you're going to find little gaps in what you thought are in your plan, and you accommodate and adjust for those.
Chris, I've been doing customer success strategy consulting for a while. And so doing these RACI discussions with the ELT or the leaders in the organization is definitely a must step one, kind of like in that process. However, kind of wanted to ask you, because I know it's not enough for like the leadership team to agree on something. We actually need individual contributors, the AEs and the CSMs to A, have an awareness of what was agreed upon, and B, start doing it. So as you were going into actually putting things into motion, what are some of the tips you can give people that are listening to these conversations on things that you have done in order to educate and then hold accountable to following this new roles and responsibility matrix?
It's interesting because one of the things that we did this, if you want to think of it as kind of three layers, we had this conversation at the executive layer. Everybody was aligned. We were good to go. Then we did it at the senior leadership layer, kind of your directors, VPs. Everybody was aligned. We had clear communication. Then what I would say we did and where we needed to improve was we did it, the third layer of communication, to your point, on a RACI. And the critical part is making sure that both parties, everybody involved in that RACI, has been on the same call, that they have understood the same discussion, that there are no questions, and that they have the same view of the direction that you're going with it. We did that with our CS team, but we didn't do it in collaboration with our account executive team. We kind of let them do it on their own. We did it on our own. And that's where I feel like my suggestion for people doing this would be, okay, when you get to that point, when you're rolling out this RACI, get everybody on a single call. Make sure that you go through and present the material on the RACI, have real life examples that you can walk through with your team members, and then make sure that you have an opportunity for them to ask questions, poke holes, et cetera. And by the way, when you do that, it's amazing how much you learn as well. With the individual contributors, the people who are working this day in and day out have incredible ideas. To be able to leverage that and then have that conversation and know that you're probably going to come away with that conversation with some modifications to your plan is absolutely okay. It's going to make it better. And there's buy-in across the board as well. So that would be my real tactical example or suggestion would be, as you're rolling this out, make sure that you have an opportunity for that open engagement across your ICs, understanding that if you've got hundreds of ICs across multiple regions, sure, you're not going to get everybody on one call, but at least do it with your team leads, with people who have their hand on the pulse of the individuals that are in market kind of doing this stuff. And that will help facilitate a better outcome.
Ready for number 2?
Number 2 is CSQOs. So CSQO is a CS qualified opportunity. So when we deal with marketing, as opportunities or leads come in for your company, those might be sales qualified leads, SQLs. They could be marketing qualified leads. They could be sales accepted leads. That would be an SAO. There's all these different acronyms for these things. So when we say CSQO or a CSQL, that would be a customer success qualified opportunity or a customer success qualified lead, and how your company deals with those could be different. But essentially, it is a lead or an opportunity that is brought in specifically identified from your customer success manager or customer success management team.
Is there a difference, Chris, between CSQO opportunity and CSQL? For you guys, it's just like the same. You just like using the word opportunity to underscore that this has already been qualified as a legitimate lead.
You gave the answer in your question. So if we think about like a marketing qualified lead, an MQL, it is truly just a lead. In other words, that's not an opportunity that we vetted. We haven't talked to them and found out, do they have budget? Are we talking to the right person? Do they actually have a need? There are a lot of things that may go into understanding whether something is truly an opportunity or if it's just a lead. A lead would be first in the process. An opportunity would be second. Now, generally speaking, when you deal with customer success managers, if I'm a CSM and I'm talking to my customer and they say, hey, Chris, I need an additional 10 licenses to your platform because we just brought on a new group. They're starting next month, so I need those. Okay, so that is not a lead. That's an opportunity. They literally have a need that's going to close pretty much immediately. So I've already qualified that.
Budget.
Yeah, exactly. So an opportunity is something that has more meat to it. It's something that we've identified. We know that they have budget. We know that they have a clear need for it. We're talking to the right person. And so often when you deal with customer success managers, they're not going to just go out there and when they're talking with their customer, the customer says, yeah, I think Bob over in accounting might have a need for something. We're not going to go drop in a CSQO for an extra $100,000 because we think Bob might want something in a department we don't even know. That would be a lead. If that were the case, and now we're going to hand that over to my rep, I would say, here's a lead. Go reach out to Bob. He may have something, but it's pretty cold at that point. An opportunity is something that I've got somebody I work with. They've been buying for us for years. They've been expanding. I know that this is something that's real. There's meat to it. There's time and there's budget, et cetera.
Do you also track CSQLs, not just CSQOs?
We don't. Pretty much all of ours are CSQOs, just simply because that's what the team is pulling in and that's kind of how we've instructed the team. What I would say is that in positions in the past, we've tracked leads and had those evolve into opportunities, which then close. We can track those accordingly. So it kind of depends on your team, on the breadth of your team and what their responsibility or their remit is as it relates to kind of trying to surface these things. But there are definitely situations where they would be leads. And so to clarify those, I think is pretty important in whatever process you're using. And like you said, if it's a system, if it's Salesforce, if it's a CRM or CSP that you're tracking those in, a lot of times you would need to work with your sales team on what qualifies as an opportunity. Is there a certain percentage? There are criteria that you want to be completely in lockstep with your sales team and your sales ops or revenue ops team on how those are classified and when they get moved into an opportunity stage. So this goes back into kind of communicating and making sure that you're collaborating with your sales counterparts, that you are speaking one language. So you're not putting in a lead when they think it's an opportunity and or vice versa.
What changes have you made in the CSQO, if you don't mind sharing?
We've been tracking CSQOs for a while at Totango, so we didn't have a huge shift in how we track or what we track. I would say the difference in what we have done recently is more around comp, which I know we're getting into now as our third little topic. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we did was that we comp the CSMs on not just expansion, not just retention, but that on pipeline. Pipeline's kind of a bit of a leading indicator as it relates to what we're going to do in expansion. I feel very strongly that pipeline is something that we should all be involved in. And so we kind of put some additional teeth around that just in how we align on pipeline metric on CSQOs that are expected. And those are all aligned and consistent with what we're looking for from a company perspective.
The first thing that you've done is you shifted any simple renewals to actually be handled by the CSM so that we smooth the renewal process for the customer. If there's no need to hand them over to another person, we can just close the renewal real quick, just let the CSM do it. And in some cases, we'll bring in the big guns, depending on the account, on the situation. If it becomes a little bit more complex, we need some commercial experience, let's put it this way, then we'll bring in the AEs into the conversation, whereby the CSM still remains collaborative and informed.
Nailed it.
And that resulted in a smoother experience, earlier renewals, more renewals being closed, and of course, a higher net retention rate. So kudos for you. An important part of that was also not just creating a variable comp plan to upsells that have closed. So not just the upsell revenue at the end of it, but actually encouraging the right behavior, which means we're also going to comp you on any CSQOs. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about what were you toying with as options? What kind of change of behavior were you expecting when starting to give them some spiffs or MBOs or actual variables for a pipeline? What did it look like? Why did you do it? And what was the outcome?
I've done this in the past where we started with Spiffs, and I'm a huge fan of Spiffs. I love just the concept of having an initiative that's kind of gated. It's got a closed end date, and you say the goal is to close more services revenue between now and the end of this quarter. Here's a spiff, and it's pretty simple. It's easy to calculate. It's easy to track, and I've had great success with doing that, specifically with CSQOs and with pipeline generation in the past. And so when we started looking at making the changes with our merger, it was kind of a demarc, right? It was an opportunity for us to say, hey, we're shifting gears. If we're going to shift gears, let's think through it and do it right the first time. As I think about what is available for the customer success manager, and for us, it's not spiffs, it's baked into their variable comp plan, is identifying that pipeline. And so I feel like the CSM team in general, customer success, they're the closest to the customer. They know more about the customer than anybody. And so they are going to have the best insight into where the growth is and growth opportunities for a given customer most of the time. And so because of that, it's like, let's comp them for that knowledge. Let's comp them for the position that they're in. Let's comp them for the work that they're doing on a daily basis with their customer. But let's make sure that they have their eyes not just on the current retention or is this customer in a good spot, which is all very important, and outcomes certainly very important, and getting value. I mean, all of those things go without saying. I know we're just specifically talking about revenue, but this doesn't remove any of the value conversation or outcomes that we need to drive as a customer success org. But what it does do is it just tunes your ear as a CSM a little bit more to be looking for some of that additional revenue opportunity. Because of that, when you put a variable or a percentage of your variable on that, it's important because then it tunes their ears to that. They start looking and listening for those opportunities for areas of potential growth, and where they might not have said, oh, wait a minute, it sounds like you're adding a different additional region. Are you going to need more seats because of that? It just kind of prompts that conversation maybe a little bit better. And truthfully, that helps our customers a lot of time. We're not trying to sell them something they don't need. We're trying to look ahead and go, hey, it sounds like you're going to need this. Can we help you get in front of that need before it becomes a problem? And so it's a very strategic and it's very consultative in the way that you handle it. The whole point of the CSQO and building that into a comp plan is, quite frankly, to help celebrate the knowledge and the experience and what the CSM is doing for their customer.
Yeah. So what was the change? Spiff?
No, the change was that the CSQO was a part of the variable.
Part of the variable.
Yeah.
So was that like, okay, if you hit this many CSQOs or a percentage, or what worked for you?
For us, we have a specific target that we're shooting for opportunities that are identified within a given quarter. We've got a target, they're heading for that target, and then they get a certain amount of attainment based on what they hit in the target.
The variable comp plan, it's very important, not just to do a spiff, not just to give them a specific target for number of CSQOs, because then somebody might just bang up like another one. If I had a CSM team, what would you recommend to do and not to do as it comes to adding CSQOs into the variable based on your own 24 experience, not just the recent changes at Totango?
First of all, you've got to collaborate with your sales team on what their variable comp or their comp plan is for the sales reps in collaboration with what you're doing with your CSM team. So look at those two plans and kind of layer them over each other to make sure you don't have a conflict. I mean, there have been scenarios where it's like, okay, if I'm comping a CSM for a CSQO for an opportunity, and I've got an account manager or a sales account executive, and they're also comped on quantity or a volume or an amount of leads that they're bringing in or pipeline they're bringing in, if you're both on a call, then you end up in conflict because it's like, I identified this opportunity. I did. We were both on the same call. Who gets it? Now you're in a situation that you don't want to be in. So make sure that however you are factoring and building into that opportunity plan, make sure that you're not in conflict with the sales team on what they're doing so that you don't have two people fighting for the same bone, so to speak. So that to me has been one learning that's helpful. And again, that just goes into the collaboration with your sales counterparts, making sure that the plans are aligned and that they're not in conflict.
One, make sure you clearly outline the process with the ELT coach, the leadership team, and then like have a plan on how you coach various individual contributors in various regions and offer them the support and the clarity and the feedback loop that you need in order to continuously tweak the changes in commercial ownership. I'm also hearing here towards the end is that consider carefully your comp plans when you're making this big commercial change moves, because you don't want to have a scenario where a CSM and an AE are on the same call and they argue who owns the CSQO or who owned the renewal. So renewals set aside, if you just have an upsell opportunity, you definitely want to make sure you don't have overlaps in comp plan or any kind of areas that are a little bit ambiguous. This is another thing when you have that powwow in that room with the ELT to think through this, the comp plans and who gets the credit for what is also clearly outlined. And I feel like that's something that is probably not solved in one meeting. Yet another area to continuously think through. This is, Chris, why a lot of companies start with Spiffs. It's just so much easier to change. And then any kind of overlaps, when they show up as you roll this new thing out, it's much easier to adjust when it's a spiff than a variable comp plan that has to go through HR and then now change. It's a beast, comp plan variables, in my humble opinion. And so if you and I were talking, I would have actually recommended that you started with spiffs first.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. When we started, I had kind of gone through the spiff routine previously, so I kind of knew what to expect there. But yeah, totally agree with you. I love spiffs. I do think they're a great way to incentivize your team and drive specific initiatives that are company centric to reach certain goals across your organization. So if you're thinking about doing something, starting with a spiff is a fantastic way to do it. And it also, you can kind of confine your spend. I mean, your CFO is going to appreciate that. You can figure out when you build that spiff that there's a certain criteria around it, so you're not blowing out your budget and certain things. But I agree with you 100%. I'm a huge fan, and I think it's a great way to kind of dip your toe into driving specific behaviors for your customer success management team.
Listen, Chris, I'm so happy I ran into you a couple months ago at the TSIA Florida in May 2024, to be specific. I think this is the first time we met. You resonated with me as a stand-up nice guy. I really wanted to bring you on the podcast so that everybody could see what a lovely person you are. And you definitely delivered. You know your stuff. You know what you do. You're so transparent and just salt of the earth. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. It was a great time and look forward to the next conversation we get to have.
Everyone, if you listen to this conversation, it sparked some ideas in you. And, how could you approach the commercials going forward? Should you have some renewals be owned by CSMs? What kind of upsell process optimizations can you do? Could you get inspired by Chris's story and do things, take them to the next level, up level your game? Put a like on the video if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, you're welcome to submit a comment or just reach out to Chris or myself on LinkedIn. We love to chat and see how we get you inspired to do more. And if you have more ideas of more guests that we should bring into our podcast, feel free to reach out. And with that, Chris, thank you so, so much. I'll see you at the next video.